Good evening, everybody. Apologies for the slight delay. We probably will get you out at the same time you thought you were going to leave. We'll be efficient about the conduct of the meeting. I'm Chris Wright. I'm the chairman of the Audit and Internal Controls Committee of the Nassau Interim Finance Authority. I'm calling to order a meeting of that committee. It is 6:30 p.m. on May 11th. I would also advise those watching that a quorum of the full board of NIFA is present. Members, the full audit committee is here. Myself, Mr. Barsky, and Mr. Petraka are here. Other members of the board are here as well, which may shorten our board meeting when it comes to this item, since we won't need to repeat the materials we've covered in the full board. I'm sorry? Right, but we have a quorum of the audit committee, 3 out of 4, so we're able to conduct business, but also a quorum of the board, and we are therefore in a position that I will offer an opportunity for non-audit committee members to ask questions in the committee meeting if you have any, so that we can be efficient when we get to the full board. Before we start, I'd like to point out that one of the people here, Dr. Zazo, a few weeks ago, took a phone call and saved a bunch of lives by recommending a course of action for some people who are having a carbon dioxide problem. So it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service. So with that, we will I want a picture, too. With that, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the Audit and Internal Controls Committee meeting minutes from around August of last year. So that is on the agenda. Would either Mr. Petraka or Mr. Barsky like to move to?
Second.
Second, made in second. Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The minutes are approved. I'm going to turn over to Carl, item 2 on the agenda. We have a number of things. This meeting is principally around approving the audited financial statements, not of the county, but of NIFA, which has a substantial balance sheet and a not-so-substantial P&L. Right? So with that, I'm going to turn over the description of the materials that are items 2A through F to our controller, Carl, and he will take us through it.
Thank you and good evening. I prepared the financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2022, with the assistance of PKF O'Connor Davies, our outside accountants. I'll let Jen Katz, our engagement partner, take you through the financial statements in greater detail if you wish, but I'll summarize our results. Our net position improved by $40,206,000 while paying $460,000 of debt with sales tax receipts. Right. The outstanding amount of NIFA bonds payable at December 31st, 2022 is $1,147,734,000 and will decrease at a faster pace in the upcoming years, as we're scheduled to pay $67,914,000 in 2023, for example. I must call your attention to minor changes we've made to some of the language in our MD&A and footnotes to our financial statements after distribution, removing references to Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch are the only rating agencies who rate NIFA's current outstanding bond issues. We also specifically named Federal Home Loan Bank as among our investments at December 31st, 2022, and mentioned that that our investment in them is subject to concentration risk in our footnotes describing concentration of credit risk. There may be additional disclosures requiring collateral for this investment. This investment is scheduled to mature on Monday, May 15th, and our expectation is that it'll mature without incident, as has been in the past. I'm happy to answer any questions before asking Jen to join the presentation.
And Carl, you raised a good point that I should have made at the beginning. The committee members and board members may have no questions because we did receive the materials in advance. And so what you just did is update us on the materials we all received in advance and have read. So it's quite possible our views and questions will be limited, not out of lack of interest, but because of prior distribution. This will not be story time where we read the financials aloud. So with that, I think you were going to see if, I know Jen has some required communications, and our audit partner from RSM is on the phone. I'm pointing to an inanimate object that suggests that that's where her voice is going to come from. So Jen, if you have anything to share with the audit committee and the full board by extension, please do.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So I know that you received this in advance, similar to the financial statement, so I won't go through it in full detail, but I do want to let everyone know status. The audit is nearing completion. We do anticipate issuing an unmodified opinion on the financial statements and plan to issue early next week. One thing to point out, this year the authority adopted GASB Statement number 87, which is a new standard that was effective this year related to the adoption of leases. It was adopted. It really did not have a very material impact on your financial statements. There are some significant accounting estimates in your financial statements, primarily related to the fair value of investments, the OPEB liability, which we also audit as significant risk of material misstatement just due to the nature of the estimates, and the incremental borrowing rate, which is a new estimate this year directly related to the adoption of GASB 87 for the leases. We did focus our audit resources on auditing these estimates and concluded that management's estimates in these areas were reasonable. Page 8 of our presentation, I just want to highlight, I talked about GASB 87, so there is what we call an EOM paragraph, an emphasis of matter, just pointing out the adoption of the new standard. So that's something that may be different than opinions that you've seen in prior years. It's not saying anything other than it was adopted, and it points users of your financial statements to the footnotes that will describe the impact of that adoption. There is other reporting that we also are required to issue every year for NYFA, and that's related to the investment compliance letter. We are still evaluating some matters there. We did become aware of, and I know management's still evaluating and identifying matters related to potential noncompliance with the investment guidelines. But based on our understanding, there is no loss to NYFA for anything that was identified, so no impact on the financial statements themselves, just a matter related to the investment guidelines and certain securities and collateral that NYFA held during the year. One other matter of required communications that I want to go through is regarding recorded audit adjustments. These are items that were identified during the audit and that management recorded adjusting entries for. One was just the elimination of a due to, due from between the debt service fund and general fund that no longer existed at December 31st, 2022 of $148,000 approximately. And then the other one was a government-wide entry just regarding amortization of premium of one of the bond series. There was a difference in about 3 months in the calculation, so it was an $84,000 adjustment that was recorded in the financial statements. There is an uncorrected misstatement this year. I think back to last year, you may recall there was that large debt refunding. When that debt refunding happened, one of the underlying bond series that was refunded actually had a reduction in the remaining life of the debt. There were 2 different series to it, A and B, and one of the series was refunded entirely, and that was the longer series, and the remaining one was shorter. So as a result, there was about $397,000 of amortization of premium that was taken this year that really should have been taken last year. So it is in the current year financials, could have been in the prior, but at the end of the day, ending that net position is now fairly stated. And when we're looking at amortization of premium in this sense, it actually is an offset to interest expense. So this increases revenue and it decreases your long-term debt. So the benefits of the amortization, the additional amortization, I should say, actually increased net position. So with that, I just want to turn it over to any questions you may have for me.
I'll have a few, and you're probably used to some of them, but also just some observations on your commentary. The current year amount was an immaterial amount last year that was booked this year. It was immaterial in both years, and so probably next year we don't have to hear about it because it's. But whenever you don't book it one year, when you do book it, you're booking it in the wrong year. So that's a standard. Okay,
Correct.
That makes perfect sense.
Correct, and it will not recur in future years, as you mentioned.
And the lease accounting, just so for the benefit of people who care about these sorts of things, there's a requirement to put all leases, whether everything's a capital lease, put them all on the balance sheet. The reason it's not material is the major inputs are the term of the lease, the payment of the lease, the rate, and then you have a present value calculation. But because of the way NYFA lives modestly, occupying a footprint that's not much bigger than this room, which is the only thing it leases, it wasn't a big entry to book. It was a new accounting pronouncement, but as Jen pointed out, there's an emphasis of a matter because it was new, but it was also booked correctly and not a big number, and it won't be because I think we might lease a photocopier too or something. There's very, very little that we lease, and we have no plans to lease, and if we did have a lease, it would be held at a public meeting and the world would know, so that it would never catch anybody by surprise. Secondly, so Jen, from an audit perspective, I assume that, and your communication says this, but since we're not reading it aloud, there was never a time when management wouldn't answer a question, wouldn't provide information to you, and in fact did answer all your questions to your satisfaction?
Correct.
Good.
Yes.
And you're aware that had that not been the case, you had redress either through the audit committee chair or any other members of the committee or board to get that answer if you needed it. So, good. And management probably has, Carl mentioned O'Connor Davies. They're an accounting firm we use. We use that efficiently because we need them a few weeks a year, and we therefore were able to do without one more full-time head many years ago. But that's not an opinion shop or another accounting firm. They are providing a service in accounting. So I don't believe that management can confirm that that's not, you haven't shopped the opinion on any accounting or audit matter. Great. Those are my standard questions. I just wanted to confirm some of the assertions that are made in some of the filings for the record. And also,
and if I may, can I also ask mine, or
yes?
More
well, I want one more, which is and the investment matter that is being discussed is what Carl mentioned, where our investment in the Federal Home Loan Bank security, which, while a federal agency, a federal GSE is not a federal agency, will be concluding on May 15th and replaced with a different type of investment security. So that's the one that Carl mentioned that in his comments.
Yes. And so we're just waiting to issue our opinion that day, just to absolutely verify there is no loss to NIFA, which is the anticipated conclusion there.
In fact, we probably will forfeit rate in the next investment because it probably paid a better rate than what we're going to have to replace it with. So my question for management would be, I assume that doesn't affect your forecast for the year, because it's only $16 million that's at interest, and that was only half of it. So a one-point move isn't going to change the world. So those were my questions and comments. Jen, you have questions for us, and you're welcome to ask them. And then we can open it to other members.
Thank you.
Okay.
At this time, just want to ask two standard questions that we always like to ask of the committee members. If you're aware of any subsequent events, and if you're aware of any fraud or allegations of fraud impacting the entity.
I'm looking around the table. The heads are shaking, and I will confirm no on my part as well. And also, the only subsequent event of which I'm aware is the one Carl discussed, which is the termination of the FHLB investment. But we're disclosing that. So.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Any else? Anybody have any questions for Jen? Who is waiting to take a flight, by the way, so we wanted to make sure we had the advantage of her time and wouldn't want to be in Dallas, although it's hotter here when you get back, just so you know.
It's rainy in Dallas, so I'm looking forward to coming back.
We'll deal with that right. So and Jen, usually the audit committee does need to hear, the auditor would like to hear us approve the financials, so we'll do that while you're still on the phone. So there is in your binder, and this is directed to Mr. Petracca and Mr. Barsky, a motion to approve the audit and the financial statements, which I would ask for a friendly amendment to include that subject to the fine points that are being worked out now and their successful conclusion, and that if you can delegate to me as chair the determination of whether that's not successful and if there's a need to reconvene the committee, which I doubt, but we want to have that ability to finish tonight.
I would add subject to a signed opinion.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah, but
But we need to make that on record too. We're approving something that doesn't have a signed opinion, so subject to the signed opinion.
which is right. So subject to the receipt of a signed opinion that does not, in the view of the chair, require us to reconvene.
Yep.
Is that a motion somebody is
So
making?
moved.
Made and
Second.
seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. That motion passes. We have other business. And Jen, I think you can hang on if you'd like to. I think the full board is here, and so I'll ask any board members if you're going to have questions of Jen in the full board meeting. No? I see no. So, Jen, if you're welcome to.
I would just ask if she.
Yeah, we'll ask that, right? And of course, Jen, obviously, this is not a situation that is made for an executive session of the board with you on a speakerphone in a large public meeting. So what I will do is offer that you're welcome to have an executive session at any time should you feel the need to between now and when the opinion is issued or thereafter.
Noted. Thank you. I appreciate that.
With that,
Right.
you're welcome to hang on or start looking at to see whether you've gotten an upgrade.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Take care.
Thanks. That's item 2. Evan, I think you're item 3, which is to submit the statutory reports to the directors. There you go.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes. So in action item 3, NIFA is required to annually issue numerous reports pursuant to the NIFA Act, the Public Authorities Law, the Public Authorities Accountability Act, and the Public Authorities Reform Act of 2009. The 2022 annual report of the authority is one such report and was provided to each of the directors in advance of tonight's meeting as a standalone document because of its size and the fact that it will also be considered by the board at its meeting later this evening. The report briefly discusses the structure, mission, and accomplishments of the authority during through December 31st, 2022. There were also a number of attachments to the annual report that must be filed annually for compliance with the aforementioned laws and acts. As listed in your committee materials, these reports include the authority's report on debt issuance, our audited financial statements, report on internal controls, report on investments, NIFA's prompt payment report, our procurement contract guidelines, property disposition report, our mission statement and measurement report, and our code of ethics. And for completeness, each year we have, as we've done this year, as we've done in previous years, we've attached the NIFA statute and bylaws just for completeness.
And the statute is as amended, right?
As amended
Right.
last year.
Right, okay.
And that completes my summary of the annual report for 2022, which is now before the committee for consideration.
Would somebody like to move the resolution that is immediately behind the report at tab 3?
Motion to move?
Made?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I vote aye as well, and the resolution is passed and moved to the full board. Carl, item 4 is the investment guidelines, and I think you stay up for the discussion item as well.
Yes, we've slightly amended the investment guidelines to make it more in line with the indenture agreement and with the NIFA statute. Again, there are minor changes throughout the document, which is before you for your review and approval.
And you'll note on the first page of those guidelines that they begin in 2003 and are amended or readopted every year thereafter. I waive the reading. But would anybody like to comment or make a motion to approve the investment guidelines?
So moved.
Made.
Second?
It's been made and seconded. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I vote aye. The investment guidelines are approved to move to the full board as well. And you've got an internal controls review.
Correct. What you have before you is a status report of NIFA's internal controls, which is to be presented each year. In it, we note the steps taken to support our system of internal controls during the prior year. As a result of the steps we took last year, we at the staff level are satisfied that our system of internal controls is effective in safeguarding assets that pass through our control and in detecting any errors in a timely manner. I note that we're continuing and updating our policies and procedures on our ongoing effort to improve internal controls. The purpose of this report is to inform you of the status of our internal control system, and no action is required on your part. Can I answer any questions?
I don't see any. It's a thorough, and again, to the viewing public, the millions who will watch this replay, we've had this material for a few days and have read it, so it's not a lack of interest, it's because we were able to absorb it in advance. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn this committee?
So moved.
Made, seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. The committee is adjourned. The meeting is yours, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. We'll now call to order the Nassau County Interim Finance Authority Directors Meeting, May 11th, 2023. The first item we will call to order is the approval of the minutes of the Directors Meeting, March 30th, 2023.
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries. Item 2 is the receipt and acceptance of the audited financial statements and related actions. I think everybody just heard the full readout and report from Chris.
Yep. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll point out, in case somebody's picking up at this point, that the audit committee met briefly before this meeting. The full board was in attendance. That may, and each indicated that they would not have comments at this meeting, so I move that we approve the resolution that was approved at the immediately prior meeting, which was amended, as amended. Yeah, in the form approved.
Is there a motion?
Made.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item is the approval of reports required by the NIFA Act, Public Authorities Law, Public Authorities Accountability Act of 2005, Public Authorities Reform Act 2009, and the authorization to take related actions.
Mr. Chairman, unless there's an objection, I'm going to move that we approve items 3 and 4, which were also considered by the Audit Committee and immediately prior hereto, where the full board was present. Item 3 and 4 is a block.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. 5 is the readoption of the amended procurement contracts guidelines and taking of related actions. Evan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest, but it's at your discretion, that we consider items, action items 5, 6, and 7. I'll discuss each one, but
I have no objection, Mr. Chairman.
if there are no objections.
No objections. Just if you can
Yeah,
highlight any changes from prior year.
sure. So these items, again, items 5, 6, and 7, they are various guidelines that must be approved by the board annually. We're recommending that no changes be made to them at this time. And I'll briefly describe each one. The procurement contracts guidelines, that's behind tab number 5. They govern the authority's procurement contracts, which are agreements for the acquisition of goods and services of any kind. Behind tab number 6, that is the property disposition contract guidelines, and they govern the use, awarding, monitoring, and reporting of contracts for the disposal of property. And behind tab 7 are the code of ethics. They list the standards and principles of conduct that applies to the authority's employees, directors, and former employees. Again, no changes are being recommended, and this is something that is required that the board do annually.
Mr. Chairman, I would move then that we approve items 5, 6, and 7 as a block.
Is there a motion?
Made.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. So that was through 7?
7.
Okay, so now we're at 8.
That's Connell.
Yep. Connell, is that where I said?
This item is consideration of a revised sexual harassment and discrimination prevention policy for the authority. State law requires that all employers in the state adopt the state's model policy or establish a policy that equals or exceeds the minimum standards in the state model. Last year in May, NIFA adopted a policy based on the state model. Last month, however, the state has updated its model policy. The proposed revised policy is the updated state model, including the complaint form, and is being recommended for approval. I'm happy to address any questions you may have.
Is annual training required for the employees?
It is.
Okay.
Is that, in what form is that training done? Is it in person, on video, is it?
It's interactive online. Kathy organizes it, I think, through Nassau
So
County.
you're following the state's program and using an approved tool for that? Okay.
When was the last time it was completed?
This year, early this year, right, Kathy?
So it's at the beginning of every new year, not at the end of every old year, basically? Yeah, okay.
I believe as a correct, everyone on staff has done it already, Kathy?
I'm sorry?
Everyone on staff, as I recall, has done it already.
Yes.
I'll move we approve it, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Next item, adoption of the internet policy, privacy policy, and authorization to take related actions.
Thank you. State law requires each agency, including public authorities such as NIFA, to adopt and post on its website an internet privacy policy, which includes the information required by the state's model policy. As part of the recent modernization of the NIFA website, the State Office of Information Technology Services provided a proposed internet policy for NIFA based on the state model. NIFA staff has reviewed and made certain minor revisions to that policy, which is now being recommended for your approval. And I'm happy to address any questions you may have.
Same question, is there training? Is it required or recommended by the state?
Not training, but it's, there's a state model and there are state guidelines.
Privacy training, email appropriate?
There are guidelines that you know, we're required to follow or have the minimum requirements in our policy.
And employees are aware of that as part of the handbook? or-
They are.
Okay.
Well, I don't, just the handbook, but certainly as it's now posted on our website.
Well, okay, then,
Yeah, exactly.
It's mostly for the benefit of any visitor to our website,
right.
so they're aware of any information that may be retained.
Correct.
By NIFA.
The new improved website, I would add, the one that's easier to navigate. The old one, you could only find something if you knew exactly where it was. This one's a little easier, so.
It says the mind interface.
Right, yeah. All right. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'll move the approval.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Also, just while we're on policies, just to remind the board and staff that the 15th is the date for the filing for financial disclosure. If you meet the requirements, please don't forget. Just a friendly reminder. Don't be like me and wait till the very last minute and have computer problems.
It's an issue.
We did, we spoke about that before,
Yes.
and there's extensions as well, Aaron.
Yes, one can extend like a tax return.
Great, okay. Next item, review and revision of the NIFA committee charters.
Thank you. Included in your materials are the revised charters for the Audit and Internal Controls Committee, the Employment and Compensation Committee, the Finance Committee, and the Governance Committee. The charters are being revised to clarify participation in meetings by video conference in accordance with the Public Officers Law, to allow the NIFA chairperson to appoint a temporary member or members to a committee as necessary to constitute a quorum, to clarify the quorum and voting requirements, to make conforming changes for consistency, and to make other minor edits. These charter revisions are being recommended now for your approval, and I'm happy to address any questions you may have.
On the audit committee, which just concluded, I assume that the proposed dates are for potentially meeting, right? We just had the March, April meeting, but it was May 11th.
Yeah, I think those are the
General-
guidelines, right? Those are the guidelines,
On or
Carl, that
about.
you follow, right?
You're okay with on or about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Connor, could you just go through again, what are the video conferencing requirements? Because, you know, I know that the law was not extended as we know it today, but I think there are some exceptions in terms of if you have some people present, some people that are remote, they can video in if they're in a place of public gathering where people would have access to where that person is sitting. So can you expand on what the state law says to the extent you know and to the extent our guidelines are consistent?
Certainly. So we made the guidelines consistent with the public officers law sort of generically, so that to the extent we, and I'll get to in a second, to the extent we adopt the state rules, then our charters now will sort of absorb them, like we're sort of like ready for that. But the state law says that you can in fact have members participate by video conference, not members that are necessary for a quorum, but beyond the quorum, if you have emergency circumstances, such as childcare, sickness, other things, anything that's determined by the board as an emergency situation, you can participate, not to make up the quorum, but beyond that, you could participate. But it does require a resolution of the board, adoption of procedures, and we probably would amend also our bylaws at the same time. But we'd have to take that next step. But right now, these charters, as amended, would sort of be ready for that.
If I may, the person who's being participating in my video comments does not constitute the quorum,
Right.
so it doesn't take care of.
You can't get to 4 with a phone in. Okay.
That's one of the major flaws of, or one of the major problems with the legislation. We do have the materials ready if the board wants to adopt this, but since it doesn't help you to gain a quorum, we didn't know whether it was necessary for the board to
You
adopt
can't
this.
vote either, can you?
You could if you have a quorum.
But did you look into that other exception, though, that the person from video, if they're like in a public library or if they're
Oh, yeah, to
someplace-
answer that question, yes. You could always have, if everyone is in a public place, you could have, 4 members in one public place and 3 members in a different public place.
Arguably, the public could find me.
As long as they can see each
Okay.
other and there's a connection,
Got it.
sure. You could always
Okay.
have a public meeting in 2 different places, as long as the public can go to each place.
Would it be to be in the state of New York? You can't be from an airport in Atlanta or something like that. It would have to be.
Don't quote me on that. Let's assume New York, right? But you can, to answer the chair's question, you can actually be in two different places as long as they're both open like this is.
And we can vote, Mary.
You could vote under those circumstances if you follow all those procedures, adoption of the rules, et
Provided a
cetera.
quorum,
Again, the procedures,
provided a quorum was otherwise present.
assuming you want everyone to come over to your house if you're ill or something and gain access, and that they can also participate. I mean, it's not.
They could
it's
clean
not
up.
As easy to do as you might anticipate.
Yeah.
But if you want us to put it into the, up for the next meeting, we have all the materials ready to go and
Why
we
not?
can do it.
Can't hurt to have that option.
Yeah, we've done it before at NIPA. We've had people at a public, at NIPA, being at a public office or something where people could.
Yeah, that's right, if it's a public office.
Th-
it's
yeah, that-
very easy.
That we could do without changing our procedures. I mean, if you're in two public places, current law allows that, but to go beyond that where the people have an emergency situation and
Yeah,
they
if they're
call
at
in,
home. If they're at their home, it's different.
they call in and vote, we need to pass a resolution and procedures. But you can always be in two different places at once as long as they're public.
We have everything ready to go, we'll give it to you for the next meeting.
The clarity, if you're someplace, if you have an emergency and you're in private, can you vote?
If you follow the procedures and you have a quorum in public,
As long as there's,
Public, I
as
get
long
it.
as there's at least 4
as
people.
long as there's been a
who are-
resolution, as long as,
Quorum, I get it.
yeah, if you follow that resolution and
You
procedure
could break a
practice.
tie,
yeah.
you could be the swing vote.
Would that second place need to be noticed?
It would have to, right, you, in addition to notice everything we did here, if we had a second place, you'd have to follow all the same rules for an open meeting.
Put out food.
But not on the emergency, two different things. So not on the emergency, that's a separate set of rules. And then you could be in a private place if you're not making up the quorum.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the package.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Connell. Martha, we're going to do consideration of county contract for H&L contracting. Actually, we have 3 H&L contracting items
Got it.
to consider, so maybe you want to go through all 3, and maybe we just vote at all 3 at the end of your presentation.
Yes, I was going to ask if it was okay with the board. I could present the 3 together. Therefore, they have the same scope of services, so it would be easier. It just so happened that it's the same vendor, but the 3 contracts were procured separate, so each one is a different process. And they're all for resurfacing roads, so I'll go item by item. So item 165, 2023, the term for that item is 180 days from the notice to proceed, and it's valued at $7,665,419. It's for resurfacing roads in the town of Hempstead, and it's basically roads west of Merrick, the town of Merrick. The second item is 167, 2023, and the term is also 180 days from the notice to proceed, and is valued at $9,450,678. And the area that this contract applies to is the city of Glen Cove, the town of Oyster Bay, and the town of North Hempstead. And item 168, 2023, is also 180 days from the notice to proceed, value at $8,287,600. And the area that this contract covers is roads in the town of Hempstead and Oyster Bay. Are there any
Do you
questions?
recall if there were big differences in the bids? I mean, is there anything, they won all 3 contracts, so were they significantly lower than everybody consistently?
So one, yeah, Ken Arnold,
Okay.
yeah, but Ken.
And I think you have to go to the mic so that you get a video. Okay.
Can I
Yes.
identify yourself, please?
Ken Arnold, Commissioner of Public Works, Nassau County.
This is 65, 67, 68.
Yeah,
So all 3 bids, they were the low bidder. Each bid we had 4, 5, and 5, so we had competition on all the bids. And they were roughly between $100,000 and maybe $300,000, $400,000 lower than the second bidder.
great, thank you.
And just to clarify, obviously, we've mentioned the jurisdictions in which the roads are, but clearly these would be county roads in the town, right? County
Yes.
Yeah, all the
county
work is
roads,
done on
not town
county
roads in the
roads.
town. Got it, okay.
If anybody feels conflicted, you can choose now to recuse yourself if you
feeling comfortable voting on your own road.
Yeah, having not seen a map, but being hopeful.
None of them are mine, maybe.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Move the 3.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, motion, all right, meeting is now adjourned. We missed by 5 minutes our goal.